Today is July 18th, 2015. Joining us on the porch are Amy Price and the cast of CNY Arts Center's upcoming production, Much Ado About Nothing.
The best place for family. What are you waiting for? Where friendships run deeper. Come join us on the porch. So glad you're on the
porch. Hey kids, you're here once again for another episode of On the Porch Radio Hour. And we're so glad to have our guests here. And man, what a story do they have today. Because we have a whole bunch of people from the cast of Much Ado About Nothing. Yeah, that's right. The guy in the third row just hollered out, "Is that William Shakespeare?" Yeah, you're right. Thanks for asking. But they're all here from the CNY Arts Center, but they also almost didn't make it. You see, there's so many of them, and only one of them really knew how to get here because Amy had been here before, so she was in charge of getting everybody here. So she was driving a bus. They had rented a bus, and about 3 weeks ago when we talked to them about being on the show, because we plan on the Porch Radio Hour very far in advance with all the people that want to be on the show. So we talked to them at least 3 weeks ago, and Amy decided to go out and get her CDL license and rent a bus. And the bus was doing okay. She picked it up at the garage, and even though I said there was a bunch of cast members here, you know, there wasn't enough to fill up a full bus, but they didn't have the little bus because it was out driving around picking up kids for camp and whatnot. So they have a full size school bus, like a big yellow school bus with the neat stop sign that folds out of the side, and then the arm that folds out of the front when you open the door so the kids don't cross too close in front of the bus. You've seen that. So she's got the bus, and as a treat, she picked up all of the cast members and then decided to take them on a neat tour. So in Fulton, near the CNY Arts Center, they had to drive over to the CNY Arts Center to pick up some props and stuff because we're on the radio. They wanted to make sure that they did the show right. So when you're on the radio, you have to make sure you have props. So they're on their way to the CNY Arts Center to pick up the props. And on Route 481, they're building a new building that I think is fascinating because it's a combination bank and Domino's Pizza. Right? So it's a bank for the local Pathfinder Bank, and they've teamed up with Domino's, and I want to know that story. But so it's a bank pizza shop, and she thought that if she drove through the drive-through part of the bank, that they could order pizza and wings, and they would send it through the little vacuum tube, and she could get the pizza. But the first thing that went wrong was that she had that idea. But the second thing that went wrong was that she tried to pull into the little drive-through thing. So that the bus it's too big. And so the construction worker came over and was yelling because they hadn't even set all the cement yet. You know, they're putting up the pillars and the little yellow posts I don't even think were in yet, so she thought she could fit through. She didn't fit. So not only is the construction worker yelling at her because of all of the work that he's done, but he's a construction worker because they're still building the building. So there was no pizza to be had anywhere. So then she had to back the bus up, and there was a group of nursery school kids that had been at their nursery school for the summer. It's like a day camp kind of thing for real little tykes. And so there's a lot of kids in diapers and strollers sleeping in the parking lot because they didn't think there'd be any traffic because all these poor little kids had to be evacuated because there was a natural gas leak in the nursery school. So they brought all these kids, and they're sitting in the parking lot sleeping, taking their nap, waiting for their parents to come pick them up. And of course all their parents are late because they don't know how to get there. And all of a sudden, beep, 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 because she's trying to back up out of the drive-thru at the bank that isn't even open that serves you pizza through the vacuum thing. And so then all the kids get up and they start crying, and so now all the nursery school people are yelling at Amy, and she's like, "I inspect your business. Watch yourselves." And they were like, "Yeah, you're right." And so then they started walking the kids, and the sounds, the soothing traffic sounds from 481 put the kids to sleep pretty quickly after that. And so then she made her way to CNY Arts Center, and then they were on their way out here. And in Palermo, we don't get great reception, and so the GPS thing died, and they ended up taking a tour of Oswego County, which they said they love, and we said we love, and that's why we have a show. So I want to thank them for being here. There's going to be great stuff happening today, so I'm glad that you're here watching on Concert Window. I'm glad you're listening on the podcast, too, on our website. So we'll talk more about that later, but for now, Gina Holsapple, you're on the porch.
You drop my almost body down to meet the water under the city, down to run the water mains and eventually out to sea. But what do you know about water rushing back? What do you know about drowning? You always meant to ask about things you could never figure out. And I stood on the bank with you, pulling anger out of the river. Figure out what it was putting it in there. So what do you know about water rushing back? And what do you know about drowning? And what are those questions you always meant to ask about things you could never figure out? Into you the other day, I had to back up to run into you again. Sometimes I miss, always wishing I would never fall in love again. But what do I know about water rushing back? What do I know about drowning? What are those questions I always meant to ask about things I could never figure out? And what do I know about water? What do you know about drowning? So what do you know about water rushing back? And what do you know about drowning? And what are those questions you always meant to ask? Thanks.
Today's episode of On the Porch Radio Hour is brought to you by Velvet. When I told my staff we were sponsored by Velvet today, I was asked, Velvet the fabric or velvet the description for how wonderfully soft and smooth something is? My response? Yes. Velvet originated as a type of woven tufted fabric with the threads evenly distributed, and was made from the finest silks as early as the 1300s. So for over the last 700 years, velvet has gone from a fine cloth to an experience. So go ahead, put some velvet in those red cupcakes. Mix black with velvet for a smooth, relaxing drink. Or maybe grab some velvet and put a picture of Elvis on there. Or a painting of one of our past sponsors, Porcelain Clown Dolls. But wherever you put Velvet, make sure there's always some available. You'll always be the life of the party and the party of life. Keep it smooth. Make it velvet. Theater liaison for the CNY Arts Center and director of the upcoming show Much Ado About Nothing, Amy C. Price, has been doing incredible things forever. And so, we had to have her on the show. So thanks for being here, Amy.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks for taking the bus trip, too. I'm sad that I was here already.
I know, I'm sad you missed it. It was an adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we're all about here.
Yeah.
And you're all about, too, because at the CNY Arts Center, I think you are kind of a force behind a lot of the adventure that happens there.
Recently, yes. I have been the driving force behind a lot of that's
You
gone
have
on.
been.
Yeah.
And that's really cool.
Yeah.
Because you are a transplant to our community, is that right?
That is correct. I was born in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, moved to Atlanta, Georgia when I was 5, grew up in Atlanta, and I've moved all over the eastern coast in the past 15 years.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So how long have you been in Central New York then?
I moved to Central New York, I believe it was 2011.
Okay.
Fall of 2011.
Wow.
Started getting involved with the theater, the local theater community in 2012, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy, you took it by storm.
I did.
That's really
Not
cool.
intentionally, but I did.
So that's really cool because I feel like I know you a little bit more than just having met you today. And I didn't know that bit. I thought you had been here a little bit longer than that and just kind of like eased your way into things.
Nope.
So for 4 years, you've only 4 years and you're already doing this stuff, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So you grew up doing theater stuff then?
I grew up in the arts.
Okay.
Both my parents are artists. My mom is an instrumentalist and a vocalist. My dad is as well. Neither of them do theater, though, oddly enough. So, but my brother, he has a degree in theater and voice. My sister was in chorus all her life. I did dance and music and theater. And my little sister, she's an active professional actress, and she writes music and produces music as well. So we're all very artistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I'm so glad that you brought that to Central New York and to the CNY Arts Center.
Thank you.
It's been really cool to see you do the things that you're doing, and now to be working with you on the first show that I've ever been part of. Always have to give myself a plug.
Yeah.
Right? So
You have
it's
to
been
plug
really
yourself.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know you were here with the crew from Narnia.
Yes.
And I learned some of your driving force and some of your history with Narnia. And I'm wondering if you have a history with Shakespeare or with this show Much Ado About Nothing.
Well, I started reading Shakespeare in high school English. And I fell in love with it because it was probably the first reading I had done in school that was directly connected to a play, to the arts. And so I made that connection right away that it was, and it's Shakespeare. It's passionate. It's so well written. It's timeless. And every year, I was blessed to have every year of my high school career, we read and performed in class a Shakespearean play, doing character work in class, and it really crossed over between education and the arts for me. So it planted a seed, and on top of that, my dad's one of his favorite movies is Kenneth Branagh's version of Much Ado About Nothing. So I was raised watching it.
Yeah.
So I know the movie backwards and forwards, and it's a great story. It's a sweet story. A lot of life lessons if you look deep enough in it. But at the same time, you can take it as nothing and just 2 hours of enjoyment. So there's a lot of levels there as well. So it's just something that I've connected with for a long time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I figured that you had some of a history there, that you had more than just a desire to do the show, because you can feel it, as we're doing shows and kind of watching you and your process, which is really cool.
I try to only do shows that I'm passionate about. As a director, you're going to be handed shows that you may not feel that closely connected to, and you still do them, and you put your 110% in. But there's something different when there's a personal reason behind a show that you do. And so I try, when I'm picking a slate out, to connect with each show that I'm assigned or that I select to do on some level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's cool. That shows.
Yeah.
So
Good.
hopefully we don't run out of things that you're passionate about.
Probably never, no.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. If you need help, we can create passion.
The bucket list keeps growing, so yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. So you are you're doing a lot of things with the CNY Arts Center, at least in my perception.
Yes, well, since the last time I was here, I was actually invited and accepted a position on the board at CNY Arts Center. So I now am sitting on the board, and it's a huge responsibility, but it's wonderful to be able to be in the decision-making process and moving the center forward as an organization. Because I've done so much with the theater, there's not really a theater representative on the board other than our executive director. And so it was important, both she and I felt that a theater representative sit on the board besides her.
Right.
So I was honored to accept that invitation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what an awesome connection and combination to have two I'm just going to say it. So two like really strong outgoing personalities and two people that are really willing to go after stuff like you and Nancy to be on the board for the CNY Arts Center that has grown from, when Nancy was here on the show before, we talked about how it like basically started in a closet, in the back of some museum or something, and then like just is now connected with the Cayuga Community College, and they're just doing a lot of things.
It's multi-arts. There's so many different arts represented. It really has blossomed over the past few years.
It has.
Yeah.
It has. And they just hosted a juried art show, which was really cool. Had a lot of really neat pieces in it. I was there checking it out the other day. So let's change gears for just a minute.
Okay.
Because we're going to talk about the CNY Arts Center now, and I want to go back to Much Ado About Nothing before the interview's over.
We'll put a pin in it.
Yes, put a pin in it. I like that.
Yeah.
So with all the stuff that you're doing at the CNY Arts Center and that the CNY Arts Center is doing, kind of give us a rundown on what's happening right now.
Well, checking out our handy-dandy calendar, which are available at CNY Arts Center's main location at CCC's campus in Fulton. We have coming up tonight, our very own Matt and Gina will be performing in our dessert series. It's a night of storytelling and music, so make sure you check it out. It is at 8 p.m., and it's going to be a fun night, and the desserts are always amazing, so come check it out. Let's see. Sunday, we have auditions, our second round of auditions for our upcoming musical, Oliver. And it is a very exciting venture. It's going to be directed by Adam Schmidtman. And I'm choreographing it, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So auditions are Sunday. The week of August 17th, the Young Students Paint Series is going to be working with artist Don Gillespie. It's for older students. They'll be doing painting classes with him, so call the Art Center for more information. And then, of course, Much Ado About Nothing is going to be opening August 7th and 8th at 7 p.m., August 9th at 3 p.m., 14th and 15th at 7 p.m., and August 16th at 3 p.m.
Awesome.
So that's the next few weeks, at least.
Yeah. That's a nice lineup.
Thanks. Yes.
So, Don Gillespie.
Yes.
Right?
You said it right. Yep.
Good. He is the gentleman that juried the last art show.
Yes.
And his artwork is still hanging at the Arts Center at Cayuga Community College.
Yes, you can see his artwork through the end of July. It will be hung on display there. Yes.
Yeah, and it's something that I would recommend people going to check out because he's got a whole storyboard of the history of some of the paintings and some of the things that he's connected with, like a grandfather, I think it is. And it's a really fascinating story. And the paintings, and it's I think it was his grandfather or great-grandfather maybe. So I apologize, Don, if you're listening, because I'm sure you are. He was I don't remember the relation, but he's a photographer. And so he's just kind of outlining all of these photographs and talking about the history of it. It's pretty fascinating. But you have to go check out his paintings, because not only does he have some really incredible artwork that's very realistic and like an old sea kind of style of painting, which is really awesome.
It's beautiful.
But he has a couple of almost surreal paintings where the longer you stare at them, the more things pop out. So there's like faces in the branches of trees and in bricks, and there's people walking, and there's handprints, and there's just like all sorts of really cool things happening. So to have an artist like that that's exhibiting their artwork at a place like the CNY Art Center is it just kind of gives you an idea of what's happening at the CNY Art Center and the kind of caliber of stuff that they're working with.
Yes.
And having somebody like you on the board and directing shows is also a highlight of the kind of caliber of things that they're doing. So let's talk about you a little bit more and Much Ado About Nothing. You held auditions and people auditioned, and then you had the show, or not the show, but now you're doing rehearsals. So take our audience through some of that process, because I know that the CNY Art Center is consistently holding auditions and having shows. And from what I heard from yesterday's auditions for Oliver, it wasn't the same people. There were people that came back to audition because they wanted to be in more shows, but they're bringing more people in. So I think that the CNY Art Center needs to keep doing that. People need to keep checking it out because it's an incredible gem. So talk just a little bit about that process and what that looks like.
Well, auditions are usually scheduled as far out in advance as we can, to give us an opportunity, if we need to hold a second round of auditions. If we have more interest than we were expecting, and we would love when that happens. Right. But with Oliver, it is the largest musical that we've undertaken to do. Is that the right word? And so we wanted to make sure we had a huge chunk of time to donate all of our attention to Oliver, and we want to give it what it's due. And give it the time that it's due. So we moved auditions back pretty early. But with Much Ado, I like to try to squeeze Shakespeare into about 6 weeks. It becomes very intensive, but it makes it a lot of fun because we have to dive in fast, and you can develop a character. He wrote for actors, so it's very easy to pull from the text a character and to work with the text. But squeeze it into the summer schedule. It's a lot of fun. So we have auditions, we have casting. Casting is probably the most important decision a director makes. If it's not cast well, it won't be a good show. Right. So you cast the show well, and then you move into your read-through rehearsal, you move into your blocking rehearsals where the actors are learning where to stand, where not to stand, where to sit, where not to fall over, when to fall over, and then you go into run-throughs of the show, run-throughs of scenes where you fine-tune the blocking, you begin to fine-tune character choices. From there, you start to finalize tech stuff with the blocking. So we introduce props and we introduce sound effects and whatnot, and then you go into dress and then you perform.
That's intense.
It is.
But it's been fun intense so far. Now that I'm like able to see that experience from the inside.
Good.
We're going to be bringing up some cast members in the second half of the show.
Lovely.
So I'm really excited to hear from them and to have that happen. So maybe we'll hear more from you during that time too. But thanks so much for being on the show, Amy, and thanks for all the hard work that you're doing too. It really shows.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You're listening to On the Porch Radio Hour. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
What's happening in Central New York is brought to us by I Heart Oswego. The Oswego Bookmobile visits parks, schools, and other sites around the city throughout the summer. Each child who visits may choose a book to take home with them. Visit OswegoBookmobile.com for times and locations. The H. Lee White Marine Museum hosts a Kids Pirate Day on Wednesday, July 22nd from 10 a.m. until noon. Enjoy 2 hours of fun and educational activities including games, music, pirate grub, tours of historic vessels, a scavenger hunt, and treasure to take home are just some of the pirating fun. Pirate garb is strongly encouraged. Call 315-342-0480 for more information. Theater du Jour presents Bingo, the winning musical, at the Ice House in Mexico on August 20th. And at the Oswego Tea Company on August 21st. Visit dujourcny.com for more information. The Port City Co-op hosts an outdoor flea market at West Bridge and 2nd Streets in Oswego on the 1st and 3rd Sundays of each month from 12 to 5 p.m. Call 315-529-5177 for more information. The CNY Arts Center Dessert Theater Series continues tonight at 8 p.m. with master storyteller Matthew Wood and singer-songwriter Gina Holsopple. The Arts Center also hosts a Writers Cafe the last Sunday of the month, with the next session July 26th at 6 p.m. The Arts Center also offers adult painting classes and writing classes, and is currently hosting Artie Camp for children during July and August. Artie Camp offers a variety of classes in visual and performing arts to school-aged children. CNY Arts Center presents Much Ado About Nothing. The show will run from August 7th to 16th. Visit cnyartscenter.com for more information. Oswego County Farmers Markets happen just about every day of the week. In Central Square, visit Crossroads Park Monday through Saturday from 9 a.m. until dark. New Haven's Farmers Market is held at the Town Hall on Mondays from 4 until 7. Lacona's Farmers Market is at the corner of Maple Avenue and Harwood Drive on Thursdays from 4 until 7. Oswego's Farmers Market is also on Thursdays from 4:30 until 8:30 and is held on West 1st Street between Bridge and Oneida Streets. Pulaski hosts a market in South Park on Fridays from 4 until 8. The Canal View parking lot in Fulton is the home of the Fulton Farmers Market on Saturdays from 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. And Parrish also hosts a market on Saturdays from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m. at the corner of Route 69 and Route 69A. The Red Room sessions at the Wooden Apple Farmstead are a time for songwriters, musicians, and anyone else who wants to build their musical skill and knowledge to get together. We share songs we are working on, bounce musical ideas off each other, and we usually have time to just play a little music. This is a supportive environment where all levels of songwriting and musical experience are welcome. The next session is July 26th at 6 p.m. The Wooden Apple Farmstead also hosts the 3rd Annual Music and Arts Festival on September 5th and 6th. The festival will include a Frisbee golf tournament on Saturday, a songwriters contest on Saturday evening, and a full day of live music on Sunday. Art will be for sale throughout the weekend. For more information about the event or to find out how to become a sponsor, contestant, performer, or vendor, visit Wooden Apple Farmstead on Facebook or call 315-591-0711.
So I'm here on the porch with some of the cast from Much Ado About Nothing, which, by the way, again, will be at the CNY Arts Center. Check it out. It's going to be awesome. So behind me is Baraccio, played by Christopher Metz. And I have Leonardo, played by Don Crow. And then over to my right is the Messenger, played by Griffin Mariner. He's also the sexton.
It's a judge.
Oh, he's the judge. The sexton's the judge. I didn't know that. Now that role makes a lot more sense. Thank you for breaking that down for me. That totally changes my character. And of course, the director, Amy C. Price, is here back on the porch as well. They're going to do the opening scene. Yeah. Played between the Messenger and Leonardo. Give just a little bit of the backstory about what we're getting ready to listen to.
All right, so the show opens at the villa of Leonardo, the governor of Messina, and we see the governor basically just having a relaxing afternoon with his family and friends when the messenger arrives with word that the prince of the country is coming by with his band of soldiers straight from war heading home, but they're going to stop at the villa for a bit and rest and relax from their time at war.
I learned in this letter that Don Pedro of Aragon comes this evening to Messina.
He's very near by this. He was not 3 leagues off when I left him.
How many gentlemen have you lost in this action?
but few of any sort, and none of name.
A victory is twice itself when the achiever brings home full numbers. I find here that Don Pedro hath bestowed much honor on a young Florentine called Claudio.
Much deserved on his part, and equally remembered by Don Pedro. He hath borne himself beyond the promise of his age, doing in the figure of a lamb the feats of a lion. He hath indeed better bettered the expectation than you must expect of me to tell you how.
He hath an uncle here in Messina, who will be very much glad of it.
I have already delivered him letters, and there appears much joy in him, even so much that joy cannot show itself modest enough without a badge of bitterness.
Did he break into tears?
In great measure.
A kind overflow of kindness. There are no faces truer than those that are washed so. How much better it is to weep at joy than to joy at weeping.
I pray you, is Signor Montanto returned from the wars or no?
I know none of that name, lady. There is none such in the army of any sort.
What is he that you ask for, niece?
My cousin means Signor Benedict of Padua.
Oh, he's returned, and pleasant as ever he was.
Well done, thank you. And I think that it's only appropriate, instead of having me give the dates, if the director would inform the crowd. Yeah, just one more time, because sometimes our audience gets so swept up in what's happening that they forget the dates.
Much Ado About Nothing opens Friday, August 7th at 7 p.m. and runs Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for 2 weekends, closing on August 16th. Friday and Saturday shows are at 7 p.m., Sunday shows are at 3 p.m.
Thanks.
You can order your tickets online at cnyartscenter.com.
So Griffin, how long have you been acting?
Mom, how long have I been acting? 3 years.
3 years.
For 3 years.
Okay, 3 years.
Yeah. Nice. And do you feel like you've grown in those 3 years in your acting abilities?
Yeah, I think so.
I
I'd
think
hope so.
Yeah, I think you have. Not that it's any of my business, but I've seen a lot of those shows over the last 3 years. So I think it's been really cool to watch you on stage. It's a lot of fun. Do you, when you are getting into your character, is there a process that you've developed in like preparing yourself for when you're getting ready to go out on stage for a show or for a rehearsal? What are you doing to get ready to be in character?
Well, I wouldn't say it was a process. More I study my lines and I say them how I think they should be said.
Wise. That's very wise. Griffin, this is just kind of a side note, but Griffin's kind of become my backstage coach. So,
I have?
You have. You don't know this. But I've asked Griffin several times. Most of the time, the questions I'm asking are, when do we go out?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and where do I stand? And he gives me all the direction I need. So I'm very thankful for that, too, because Griffin and I walk out on stage a couple of times together, and it's nice to have somebody that knows what they're doing. I'll be bringing a notebook tomorrow so I can write it all down. So it's been really great to work. And Griffin and I are learning a song that we're going to sing together, too, which is really exciting. So thanks, Griffin. So, Don, I'm going to ask you a couple of the same questions, but some different ones, too.
Okay.
You are a Fulton native, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And so, not that I want to, put you in this position, but I'm pretty sure that we went to school together. And I don't remember you being in any shows.
No.
When did you start acting?
I was in the shows.
I didn't go to many.
Did you? What year did you graduate?
95.
95. See, I was 2 years behind you, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I probably didn't recognize you. I probably didn't pay attention. So anyway, you started acting in high school?
I did. Well, actually, I started acting when I was about 10 and acted
Nice.
throughout junior high and high school. I was in the musicals. I had the lead right after you graduated in my sophomore year in the musical called The Boyfriend. And I continued through Fulton Community Theater after I graduated for a few years, and going to college and everything, I dropped out of acting for a little while, and I just recently returned about 3 years ago.
Man, that's cool. I'm glad you did.
I am too.
Yeah, it's been cool to watch, too. I've enjoyed seeing you in the shows. Okay, so you have quite a history.
Mm-hmm.
So now, when you were in high school and junior high, did you start a process of like getting ready to be in character when you were going out on stage?
Just tried to keep the butterflies down.
Yeah, that's
all.
right. That's right.
I had a little stage fright at first, going on
Mhm.
stage and everything, and I just took a second, calmed myself down, took a couple quick breaths, and just went out there.
Nice.
I figured I'm going out there and better do my best or look like a fool out there, you know?
That's right. That's right. When you decided to get back into acting,
Mhm.
what was like that driving force?
Well, actually, it was a little bit of a sad story. I went through a divorce, and
Okay.
I was needed to get my mind off things, and
Mhm.
a friend of mine who's still involved with the theater and everything, her son was involved with the theater, contacted me and said they're looking for people to audition, because I was talking to her before about wanting to get back into it and everything. I'm like, what? It was a great opportunity to do something. So I went audition, got a role, and just took off from there.
That's cool. So now that you're back into it, well, how many years has it been now since you got back into acting?
About 2012, I got back into it.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. So you've been doing it, and most of it has been with CNY Arts. You've been going to different theaters?
It's been through Fulton Community Theater. My
Mhm.
first CNY Arts show was last year for Romeo and Juliet. It was the first show I did with
Okay.
CNY Arts.
Cool.
So
Cool. Yeah, and the Fulton Community Theater's been around for a long time.
it has. We're just celebrating our 25th year this year, 25th anniversary for
Oh.
Fulton Community Theater.
Okay. Now, what show did you do for the 25th anniversary with them?
We just did Plaza Suite, which was our big show for this
Oh,
year
yeah,
for the
sure.
25th anniversary. We also have a Evening on Broadway planned coming up, and a show called Night Mother
Okay.
is coming up. You can find out on the website.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So I'm going to bring Chris up, who is Baraccio, and
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to, before I get into all the personal stuff, what kind of studying did you do to learn about the character of Baraccio?
Well, primarily it was I really had just didn't know the show at all,
Okay.
and I had watched the movie with Kenneth Branagh,
Mm-hmm.
and not that you get a lot from that character, but he's a character that I feel is very close to his own company, which is Don John and Don John's gentleman Conrad.
Mm-hmm.
So he just wants to be more with them. So he's kind of following along with them, and it's
Okay.
but he's got a very tactful mind
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because he kind of creates the mischief.
Right. Right. And that was going to be my follow-up question. Like,
I'm getting ahead of myself then.
oh no, this is fantastic. How I think you do really well creating the mischief. Is that a role that you've played before?
No, actually, this would be the first time that I've actually had the opportunity to play a villain
Okay.
as a character. And it's a lot of fun, and everybody usually says that. It's
Right.
playing a villain's a lot of fun because you can just kind of let loose, do a lot more
That's right.
with the character.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Now, you have been acting for a long time?
Not really acting. I
Okay.
did a lot of backstage stuff.
Ah, okay.
Lights, tech,
Mm-hmm.
sound effects, mostly. Primarily a lot with the Oswego Players.
Okay.
And a few years ago, I did my first acting with a dinner theater called the Kitchen Witches,
Okay.
and it was a small cast of 4,
Awesome.
and I was the only male in that cast.
Oh, wow.
As it was a radio. Well, it wasn't a radio show. I'm sorry. It was a PBS cooking show,
Oh, sure.
and the character I played was the producer / announcer,
Okay.
and his mother was the chef on the show. So it just caused him a lot of stress.
Right. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, that's really cool. Did you do that with Oswego Players?
Yes, that
Nice.
was their dinner theater several years ago.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Well, that's really fun. And so how did you get hooked up with CNY Arts then?
I got hooked up with CNY Arts. My first show was Romeo and Juliet last year,
Mm-hmm.
and It was a message I received while I was just on my computer one day over Facebook that said, "Could you come out and audition?"
There's a lot of begging I hear. So good for you for just saying that. Could you come audition? It sounds like it was a little more entailed than that. But I'm glad you did.
I may still have those messages, but
you don't have to send them.
I don't know that anybody else needs to read them.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I'm so grateful for being able to not only be part of Much Ado About Nothing and to be part of the CNY Arts Center, but I'm really grateful that you guys came out for the show. And, that bit about planning 3 weeks in advance was, just introduction stuff.
Before we go, Matt, I'd like to ask you a question.
Hey!
As a cast member
This
of
doesn't
Much
happen
Ado About
much.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So, what's been your favorite part so far, being involved with the show?
Well, there's actually several things.
Yeah.
And I have been. I'm gonna throw myself out like a little bit here.
Okay.
I've been trying to figure out how I can be more, for lack of any other better term, like how I can be more socially involved with the cast,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm feeling like I can do my part.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go out and I can do my lines and I can sing my song on my ukulele and I can walk off the stage. But I'm not, and so I can make those connections from actor to actor or like character to character.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not making those connections personally, and I'm not throwing myself out there. And so it's one of my favorite things so far has been watching the other cast members do that, because they're comfortable in the theater because they've all been there for so long and they've been doing this stuff. And I'm comfortable talking in front of people, and I'm comfortable talking to people, but now I'm trying to add that new piece of being in the theater, and so it's been really interesting to watch, and I've really been enjoying observing them on the stage as well, and how they create those connections and how they emote, through facial expression and that kind of stuff, and that's stuff that I'm trying to learn as well. And one of my other favorite pieces is that it's forcing me to take more risks than I originally anticipated. So I was taking a huge risk in auditioning, because just the audition was difficult enough.
Right.
But then to not only accept a role with speaking lines and being in a lot of scenes where I'm not speaking, which is really tough for me, because I need to be talking all the time. And so I'm also learning how to play the ukulele, and I'm singing in front of people, which doesn't happen a lot.
Right.
And so there's a lot of things that I'm doing, and so I'm really enjoying that too. So there's a lot of stuff, of my own stuff that I'm bringing to that. So,
Right.
So I'm answering your question in big terms, but it's been a ton of fun actually,
Good.
and I think one of my favorite pieces so far is observing and learning. This has been a great learning experience, and now I'm trying to translate learning into doing.
Right.
Because I don't want to be that guy that's on the stage where everybody's like, oh, he's learning. I need to.
Yeah.
So confidence is
Yeah.
happening. So
Well,
yeah,
good.
thank
I'm
you for
glad.
asking. I'm glad too.
Yeah.
It's been really cool.
I know you're not the only one feeling that insecurity on
Right.
stage.
Yeah.
Every actor is insecure. That's why we perform other characters and not ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
So we hide behind our characters. So
Crazy.
don't feel like you're the only one feeling that way.
Maybe that's why I'm having a hard time. All right. I'm going to take that into consideration. Yeah. I applaud you. Thanks again for being here, everybody. I want to welcome back up to the stage National Award-winning singer-songwriter Gina Holzapfel.
Walrus and the carpenter were walking hand in hand. They wept like any one of us if all we saw was sand. The world is bigger than an oyster. The world is not a pearl. I'll move from woman into crone, but I started as a girl. 7 maids with 7 mops swept for half a year. Do you suppose the walrus said that they could get it clear? I doubt it, said the carpenter as he shed a bitter tear. I wish we'd taken better care of what we had right here. The world is bigger than an oyster. The world is not a curve. I'll move from woman into crone, but I started as a girl. Sea was wet as wet could be. The sand was dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no clouds were in the sky. No birds were flying overhead. There were no birds to fly. My daughter told me to turn her face toward mine with just one question: why? The world is bigger than an oyster. The world is not a curl. I will move from woman into crone, but I started as a girl. And I will tend my garden faithfully. I'll pray for all the world, so my daughter can grow up just like me, starting as a girl. Walrus and the carpenter were walking hand in hand. They wept like any one of us if all we saw was sand.
Pretty maids all in a row. That's how Amber Winnie's grandfather described the scene on August 4th, 1979. There were all these female storytellers from Tonkahogen. It was the first Tonkahogen female-only storytelling contest. The storytelling contest started in 1975, and for those first 4 years, there were only men that ever joined the storytelling contest. And Chief Mawayout decided that he needed to have women represented. Because as he remembered as a kid, when they were sitting around the fire, they were sitting around doing their chores, they were making dinner, they were doing those things, it was the women that were always telling the stories of the family. It was always the women that were telling the stories about things that had happened in town. So why these men always thought that they needed to be the storytellers and the women didn't was surprising. So he decided that at the next council meeting, he was going to propose that they had a storytelling contest that was for women only. And they got 8 contestants. And Amber was one of them. And Amber was the youngest at 17 years old. And the oldest was one of the grandmothers, one of the wisest women in town. She was 93, and she was going to tell a story. And boy, did she tell a story. And then everybody else ranged in the middle. But Amber, at 17, Amber really gave the old lady a run for her money. But in the end, it was the old woman that was given the gold medal, but Amber was given the silver. And everybody knew the 93-year-old story. They knew her own personal story. So when they were asking questions at the end, they were interviewing the winners. The top 3 medal winners were then interviewed, and each got to tell one more story at the end of the contest. So when they interviewed Amber, she said, "I'd like to answer my question with my final story." And they said, "Okay." And the question was, how did you come across the story that you told? And so Amber then went into the story about how when she was little, and she spent time with the elders of the village, that she would always hear about vision quests, and she would always hear about how the elders would talk about those things as kids, and then they would do them, whether it was something that another one of their elders set them to, or that they did on their own. As time passed, and as the village progressed, it became more and more something that individuals just did on their own, or they set their friends to do, and it wasn't so much sanctioned through the elders. But Amber had a grandfather that set her on her vision quest. She asked for it. And it was pretty rare for a woman to do that as well. But he sent her on a vision quest. And how it worked was one Friday morning, they met, and they watched the sun come up together from the highest peak in the town. It just so happened that that's how it needed to happen. You had to be at the highest peak to watch the sun come up. That was the start of the vision quest. The issue was that the highest peak in town was at the top of town hall. And so normally you would climb to the top of a hill, but town hall was the tallest point in the town. So the night before, the grandfather snuck his extension ladder out, and they climbed up to the lower roof in the back, and then they used the fire escape to climb up the rest of the way to the top of the building. And they sat and they watched the sun come up. And as the sun completely broke the horizon, the grandfather broke the silence for the first time, and he turned to Amber. And all he said was, "Now you go." And he pointed to the west. And he said, "I will meet you there on Sunday." She didn't know where there was. She kind of got a feeling that he didn't know where there was either, but he would still meet her there. She was 12, and he handed her what looked like a cigarette. And she said, "Grandfather, I can't smoke that." And he said, "You won't. It's not a cigarette. It's just sage rolled up in a paper. And when you find your spot, you'll mark it. You'll walk in a circle. You'll walk out your 10-foot circle with your sage. And then you'll set it on a rock in the middle of your 10-foot circle, and you'll let it burn out the rest of the way. And then you'll sit, and I will meet you there. And you will stay in that 10-foot circle." So for 3 days, Amber sat in the middle of her 10-foot circle. She had found the place. She just headed in the direction. She climbed down from town hall, and she just headed in that direction that he pointed. She started walking. And as she started walking down the street, she thought, "I have no idea where I'm going, but I need to walk. I need to walk in that direction." So she kept walking, and as she walked, her paces, her footsteps, got into a rhythm. And they were in the same rhythm as her heart. And she noticed that every time she had a thought about how she didn't know where she was going, her paces would quicken. Which she thought then meant that her heart rate was quickening, which meant she needed to stop thinking about where she was going, and pretty soon she got into a rhythm. And she ended up on the outside of town, and the trees got thicker. And as she got into the trees, it got darker. And the leaves on the ground got thicker, and the grass went away, and there was moss, and there was stones, and it was damp. And she sat down. She got on her knees, and she looked in a complete circle, 360 degrees. And that's where she needed to stay. And she pulled that little clump of sage out of her pocket, lit it with the lighter, and walked out what she thought was a 10-foot circle. Grabbed a stone, cleared away the leaves, set the sage on the stone, and let it burn out. And she sat. And she sat for 3 days. There were times that she slept. Never at night, though. You can't sleep at night in the middle of the woods when you know you can't leave a 10-foot circle. But during the day, she was able to rest. But as she sat, and it got to be that hour that everybody talks about, but nobody's ever really sure that they see, where they say it's always darkest right before the dawn. It's always the most quiet right before the sun breaks. All the animals stop. No humans are out. And it's just you and the world. And where she decided to sit down was really dark at noon. So to be 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, she could see nothing. And it was the second night that she sat, and it had to be that time. And she looked. And she wasn't sure if her eyes were open or closed, so she had to blink them several times. Sometimes they were open, sometimes they were closed, and it never changed. It was always the same light. It was always no light. And as she stared, trying to figure out what was happening, trying to see something, trying to figure out what direction she was facing, an old woman walked into her sight line. Copper skin, with what looked like a brown deerskin dress just hanging off of her. This woman was old. She walked to the edge of that 10-foot circle, only marked by sage and footprints. And she stood, and she looked down at her feet, and then she looked back up at Amber. And Amber didn't know what to do, so she asked, "What do I do?" And the woman said, "Tell me a story." And so Amber did. And as she told the story, the woman got closer and closer, and it never looked like she took any footsteps. She just got closer and closer until she laid her hands on Amber's shoulders and said, "You'll never finish this story because it will always be happening." And then she looked deep into Amber's eyes and she faded away. And Amber wasn't sure if she turned and walked away or if she just disappeared. And as the sun came up, she knew that that woman was still standing in the distance, leaning on a tree, sitting on a rock. At one point, she could hear her behind her. She knew her footsteps, or what she thought was footsteps. Maybe it was a heartbeat. She wasn't sure. And she thought, I think today is the last day. But she couldn't remember. And when she thought it was getting into the afternoon, she started to have that same experience, where it didn't matter if her eyes were open or closed, but it was always dark. And she stared, because this scared her. She didn't know what was happening. And that old woman was there, leaning on a tree. And it became really detailed, and Amber could zoom right in on the hand that was leaning on the tree, and it was just one finger that seemed to be very casually picking the moss off the bark. And as she followed the hand down to the arm to the neck, and she looked at the face of the old woman, and it was no longer an old woman. There was a young man standing there, with the same kind of clothing, but it was just wrapped around his waist. And then she followed that arm back up to that finger, and it wasn't picking moss off the bark, it was tapping out a beat. Now he must have been 20, 30 yards away, and that drumming became so loud from just the tap of a finger. She could hear nothing else. And it made her ears feel like they were bouncing off of her head and reconnecting and bouncing off of her head and reconnecting. And it drummed and drummed, and she looked at his face and he just had a huge smile. And then their eyes met, and she couldn't keep the stare. His eyes were so bright. The middles were so brown, but they were so bright. She looked down at his feet, and even though the top half of his body wasn't moving, his feet were just going everywhere. And he slowly drifted, just like the old woman, away. He never came to see her, not close. But he watched her the whole time as he disappeared, and his feet never stopped moving. And his feet were going so fast, but his body was moving so slow. She couldn't keep up. And then he tapped her on the shoulder. And she jumped, but right in rhythm. Twice. Jumped to her knees, jumped to her feet. Right in rhythm. Boom, boom. And she met the eyes. And there he was. And it was her grandfather. He said, I told you. I told you I would come. And the first two things before they ever even made it out of the woods, Amber said was, they're inside me. And grandfather just smiled. He said, yes. And he said, the old woman is your storyteller. And the young man is your drummer. He's your rhythm. He's your song. And when you put them together, you tell beautiful stories. And that was the answer to her question. So the person interviewing her had to follow up. So they asked, where is this place? And she just smiled. And she looked out over the crowd, and she sang, this is my home, this is my only home, this is the only sacred ground that I have ever known. Should I stray in the dark night alone, rock me, goddess, in the gentle arms of Eden. Rock me, goddess, in the gentle arms of Eden. Thanks. And thanks for being here for the completion of another episode of On the Porch Radio Hour. I'm so thankful that some of the crew, the cast, I should be specific, some of the cast from Much Ado About Nothing came out to the farm and hung out. I want to thank Griffin's mom for being here and driving him because it was so awesome to have him at the farm. And I want to thank everybody for being on Concert Window. And I want to thank everybody for listening on the computer. And for everybody that's listening, you have to come out next Thursday to the Oswego Farmers Market. We're going to be there broadcasting and recording the show live on the big trailer stage that they have next to the food. We're going to be there at 5:30. Don't get thrown off. It's okay. I know that we have some pretty concrete listeners, and they're huge fans. It's okay, people. Change is good. It's the Oswego Farmers Market. Be there at 5:30. Don't worry about 7. Don't worry about 7 o'clock recording time. Just be at the farmers market, get some baked goods, get some kettle corn, and come hang out. It's going to be a great show. We're going to have all sorts of folks. I'm going to be there. And the rest of the folks from On the Porch Radio Hour are going to be there. There's going to be music. It's going to be awesome because you're going to be there too. And I'm so thankful for that. So, until next Thursday when we see you at the farmers market at 5:30, peace to your journey.
On the Porch is a production of the Wooden Apple Farmstead, with host and writer Matthew Wood. Our musical director and sound technician is Gina Holsappel. Our stage manager is Ray Monet. Special guests include Amy Price, Don Crow, Griffin Mariner, and Chris Metz. Find information about past shows, being on the porch, and much more online at ontheporch.weebly.com.